Hello everybody, and welcome to the next part of my series of videos on the Keihin carbs for the Honda CB900 750 series. So the previous video showed you us rebuilding the main number 2 carburetor, and what I want to do now is to show you how to put these together in a bank. We know this is the number 2 carburetor because it has got the accelerator pump at the bottom of it, and it has all the linkages on the side. So it's a relatively easy carburetor to position, and so we know that this has to be in the number 2 position. I'm going to assume that the engine side is on the table and that the airbox is facing upwards. So I know that this carb will sit like this with the airbox facing up. So there's it in the number 2 position. Now the other carburetors are similar, but they're all slightly different, and so what I wanted to do is to show you how to put these together. There are a number of linkages that hold the carburetors together. The throttle linkages actually tie into each other, so there's no additional parts to put in except for a couple of the springs, but there are some ports that need to be tied together. We have the air joints, and the air joints sit it basically feeds back up to one of the diaphragm valves at the top, and the central air joint has got a T-piece on it, and it has the 2 smaller pieces that fit onto it. So I know that when I've got these pieces, that air joint there fits between carburetor number 2 and number 3, and these longer pieces fit between 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So I'll remember those when I'm putting the carburetors together. The next item I'm going to look at is the fuel joints, and this is the fuel line that comes in from the tank. This fits between carburetor number 1 and number 2, and this is the one, it's a brass T-piece, and so I put some new O-rings on there, and I know that fits between number 1 and number 2, so I'm going to put that there. 2 other pieces, the 2 other fuel joints, which are the larger of the aluminium tubes. One's long and one's short, and you can see this is the same size as that, so I know that that fits between carburetor number 3 and number 4, and this piece fits in the middle, the longer piece in the middle. And likewise, these are the accelerator pump tubes. The longer one goes in the middle, and the shorter ones go between carburetors 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And likewise on the springs, they go like that. So I need to keep those together just to remind myself of where the components are going to fit. And so what I'm going to do at the moment is I'm going to show you how to line the carburetors up, and then how to put them together in banks. I'm going to move this out of the way to start off with, and I'll remember that those are the parts that go between the central banks, and I'll take these out of the way because these are the ones that go between number 1 and number 2. So we know that this is number 2 carburetor, but what about the others? If I look at this one, this is it's got the linkages on this side of it, and it's got a port, and I look at it there, and when I look through the fuel port, I cannot see all the way through it, and it doesn't blow all the way through. So I know that this is one of the outside carbs. So I'll put that down for the moment. And I know that this is the number 3 carburetor. And the reason I know that is that if you look through this fuel port here, you can see all the way through it. Hopefully I'll manage to get a view so you can actually see all the way through it. But it is crystal clear, and you blow through it and you can clearly hear that the fuel will go through it. So when I place this down next to number 2, I know that I can get fuel through the feed pipe, through number 2 carb, and straight away through number 3 and onto number 4. So that has to have a fuel passage all the way through it, just like this does. This carb I know has got a blanking plate on it, and when I look at where the blanking plate is, it's on this side, and so therefore I know that is on the outside of the bank of carbs. And I've got a linkage on this side, and I've got a fuel line there, so I know that that is number 4 carburetor. And just to check, I look at number 1, I've got the linkage here, I've got a blanking plate on the outside, so that's going to go to the outside. I check that there's no fuel line going all the way through, and it's blanked off, and I know that that sits like that as number 1 carb. Air side up, engine side down, and I've got my carburetor bank in the right order. When you build the carburetor bank up, it's important to do it in pairs, so you do number 1 and number 2 first, then 3 and 4, and then you put them together on these frames. Before I do that, I'm just going to check the float bowls, and I'm going to do that because it is possible to switch them around and get them in the wrong position. So the float bowls, I want to make sure I can access the drain screw from the outside. So if I look at that, yes, I can get to there. Yes, I can get to there. And on these two here, I can get at it from the other side. It is possible to swap these bowls round, and so therefore trying to get into the screw from this side, and you don't want that. So now is the best time to look at doing that. If you need to swap the bowls over, do so now, but if you've kept everything in the right order, you won't need to, because they'll be in the right position. So there we have it. I've got carburetor number 1 and carburetor number 2, and here's 3 and 4. And I'm just going to show you quickly how to put numbers 3 and 4 together. Put number 4 on its side like this. I have got the air joint. I'm going to slide that over the air port. I have got a little jar of vegetable oil here, and I just gently dip that in so I can get the O-rings will go in nice and easily. And I've got the accelerator pump line there. And away we go. And I then have the throttle linkers like that. Now, on the mating part, you'll see here that I have a little fork, and that fork has to go over this linkage here. And obviously the air pipe goes over this part, the fuel line goes in here, and the accelerator line goes in here. When I put the two carburetors together, I need to make sure that this fork fits in behind, he's just trying to find a screwdriver, behind that washer. I don't want it to go between the washer and the spring. I want it to go there, between the spring and that recess. Hopefully I'll manage to put these parts together like this. So let's see how it goes. One thing I should say is that when you look at the engine side of the carbs, I want to make sure I can see the screws, and that when I turn the throttle it goes like that, so the screws face down the way. And so I'm going to make sure in here as well that I've got the screws like that facing down the way. So I'll make sure that the throttle is fully closed. Sorry, I'll make sure that the throttle is open. So put it down like that. I'll put the spring back on the linkage. I'll make sure this throttle is open as well, and so therefore I should be able to then assemble the carbs relatively straightforward. I'll put the linkage on first, make sure that goes over the top, and then put the pipes in the right place. Have it. So I'm just going to check that the pipes are all correct. So I've got the air joint pipe is in place, the accelerator tubes in place, and the fuel joint pipe is in place. If I turn the bank around, I'll make sure that everything's hunky-dory here, and I can see that the spring is in place, and I can see that I've got that wrong, so I do not have that linkage correct. So what I need to do is I need to take that, pry that apart a little bit. I'll try and move around here so you can see it a little bit better. Push it apart just a little bit so I can get that washer the right side of the fork. There we go, and it is now in the right place. Can you see that? There we go. Again, I'll just check again. Pipes in place, air joints in place, the fuel lines in place, the accelerator ports in place. I have the tang in the right place on the adjustment screw, the synchronization screw, and I have the springs in between the linkages. So there we go, carburetors number 3 and number 4 put together. Now I stack them sideways like that just to make sure they don't fall apart. It is very easy to pull them apart afterwards, but the next stage would be to fit the choke linkages, and this will actually hold the carbs together more thoroughly. So I've got a choke linkage here. I've checked that it's okay, some choke plates, and I've got some screws, and what I'll do is I will feed that linkage through the body, and the way that I do this is I need to make sure that the linkage is on the inside of the carbs, and so I check, I've got the linkage here. I'll just quickly check again. Yes, there's nothing on the outside, so I'm putting it through the right way. As I put it through, dip it in a little bit of oil just to make sure I've got a little bit of lubrication. Should be relatively straightforward. You'll always go through the first one very easily. And it's important that you put them through the second one and as little resistance as possible, because you don't want your choke to be a difficult thing to operate. And look at that, absolutely perfect. So what I'm going to do now is, that has got the choke actuation bar in place. I will screw on the chokes themselves using these screws, but I will Loctite them in place. There's nothing worse than having one of these little screws come loose and fire itself into your engine. So I'll go get some Loctite and I will put the screws on, and I'll pop back after having built up these two, because I'll put these together in exactly the same manner, and then I'll show you how to put the two pairs of carbs together. Okay, so what we have now are two pairs of carburetors that we put together. You saw me put these ones together, which is number 3 and 4, and I did exactly the same, putting the numbers 1 and 2 together. You can see that the only difference is that the fuel line has got an upper part to it there, and you must make sure you've still got that little brass washer. I'm going to link these two banks together now, and we're going to make sure that we've got everything lined up and that there are no issues with the linkages and with the choke operation. So again, I will get the little dab of oil on my side of tubes. All of these have got new O-rings on. There's no point in messing about trying to put anything else on them. And again on here, let's put a little bit of oil on the ports, as I say, and on the T-pieces. There we go. So this one goes on there, like that, and this one goes on to this little port there. Okay, so that's now ready to put together. We have an air bracket like this that will hold these parts together, and then there is a different bracket, which is this one here, which goes at the front, which will sit like that. And now for the difficult part, I'll just put this out of the way, make sure I don't knock that over, and we'll try and make sure that we have the throttle in height position, so we can make it go together a little bit easier. Same position as that. And so I'm going to try and get this part here over the mating piece. So we have the pipes, we've got the air pipes on. I need to make sure I have this other air pipe in here. Air joint, I think is what they call it. It's not too keen on going in, but it will go with a bit of persuasion. And there we are. Bring the parts together. Happy that the carburetor has been put together. So what I'm going to do very carefully and gingerly now is tip it up like this, and then I will gently put on the front bracket, which will fit on like this. Obviously there's a little bit of adjustment to be done there, and when I put the parts on, I'll put the screws in and I'll show you how to line them all up. Now that I've got the carburetor bank pulled together, I've put these screws in very, very lightly just to hold it in place, but the important thing is to look where the throttle linkage is working, and you can see here all the throttles are tied together. We've got all of the ports in place. So I've just got a little bit of an issue with this one here. It doesn't seem to go into sitting straight. There we go. I've got some work to do in the throttle linkage, but you can see all of the tubes are in place and are being held. And before I put the back bracket on, I want to make sure I've fixed the choke. But you can see that all the rest of the ports are in place, and the throttle linkages are as they should be. So before I proceed any further, I need to make sure I've got my choke linkage set correctly, which it is in roughly the right place. I've got a little spring here that I need to put over the top of the secondary linkage. There we go. And that then will, and I need to pull this round first. Very finicky this, but there, that's it. So therefore I've got my throttle linkage in place. I've got the little spring, so that it can operate separately, but it will function all together when the throttle is pulled around. So I'm now ready to put the upper bar on, and this fits in here like this. I will make sure that the into there. I will then put some screws in here. The manual says that these should be M4 screws, but they're not. They're actually M5, and I've decided I'm going to replace them all with Allen keys anyway. And so Allen bolts. So if you are going to replace them, don't replace them with what it says in the manual, because it's wrong. I'm just going to use this to hold each of the carbs in its correct location, so that I can then make sure that all the linkages work before I tighten anything up. Perfect, there we go. So here we are. I've just put the rest of the Allen screws in the top. You can see they're still loose, so I've not really done anything clever here. I've made sure that the front plate here is also screwed in, but again, these are still loose. As you can see, there's nothing been tightened up, and I just want to make sure that everything functions correctly before I nip it all up. I'm going to check that the linkages on the throttle are all in the right place, and that the forks are behind each of the screws, the washers. And so if I look here between number 3 and 4, I can see that the throttle linkage is indeed between the number 3, you can see it's behind the washer, and if I take it a bit further around, you can see the same on number 1 and number 2, and you can see the same number 3 and 4. And if I get my finger out the way, you'll see, make sure you don't trap your fingers there because it can't hurt, and you can see the same between number 1 and 2. So I'm happy that throttle linkage works. You can see that I've put the spring in between numbers 3 and 4, and I'll do the same here. I'll just squeeze that just to keep that in place there. I'll put that in a second. None of the choke valves are in position. I took these off because I wanted to make sure that the choke shaft moved correctly. You'll see here that this is where the choke cable gets clamped, and this is where the choke cable end goes into. And you can see on here that there is a large spring on the left hand side, and you've got a very small spring on the right hand side. And the small spring is basically what effectively operates the choke levers. And you just need to make sure that that very small spring goes over the top of that lip there and catches into that little groove, and that the remaining part matches up with the big spring. So that's now all in place. I'm quite happy with that. What I'm going to do is I will then wind this open like that, and I will then get these plates. I'll put them on. I will put them into these little screws, but I will make sure that I Loctite the screws in place, as I said earlier. So therefore I know now that all of the carbs are together. I'll just check all these bars again to make sure that they are in place. You can see I can rotate them quite easily, and that means that they're not under any pressure and they're not jammed, and so therefore the O-rings have the best possible opportunity to work. And I'll just check the air ports, and they're in good condition as well. So I'm now in a situation where I can start to tighten these up, and there is an order that you should tighten these screws up. And if I take well, we'll start with the front bracket, I think. So to start with the front bracket, the way that I'm going to go here is I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'll do it again. So I'll do this one, then this one. I'll do one on each of the carbs, and I'll do the one on the outsides, just to make sure I'm not doing anything stupid to them. There we go. And just make sure that, just do that, just make sure they're not misaligned. And they need to be tightened up to, I think the specification is 2 to 3 foot-pounds. I'll put it onto the video when I'm absolutely sure, and I'll also put the metric equivalent. But that's the front bracket done up. If I then do the top bracket, you can hear the CV carbs move and the noise it makes with the slides move down. Lovely, lovely, lovely. And so therefore I'll do the same here. Got one missing there, I'll put one in there. So I just want to put these in. I'll nip them up. I'm not going to do them too tight because I want to nip them up, and then I will check the slide operations, the float operations, and everything like that. This again, these are slightly bigger. These are M5s, but they're still about 2 to 3 foot-pounds. And again, I will put them on the video. So here we are on the final steps of the building the carb. As I say, we've checked all the linkages, we've checked all of the springs, we've checked that it all works, and I'm now happy that that's nice free choke operation. So I will put these plates on, and as I say, Loctite the screws in. You can see I've got some little bit of float in those. On the carb side itself, on the throttle side, you can see here that it's moving quite freely. I've got access to the adjustments, and if you look at this, you can see that there's a lot of synchronization to do, because it probably shows it better like that. You can see there's a gap at the bottom of the butterfly valve there, and there isn't any there. There's a tiny one in number 3 and a tiny one in number 4. So what I've got to do is I've got to synchronize these carbs. I'll show you how to bench synchronize them before you put them on the bike, because it's so much easier to do most of the synchronization off the bike, and then when you get onto the bike you can do it a little bit more accurately with the vacuum gauges. But mechanical synchronization is very straightforward and is very simple to do, and I'll show you how to do that in the next video. Finally, I just wanted to check, I've got the compression springs here between the linkages, making sure that there's no float wandering about there. I've checked the air ports and everything seems to be okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and tighten these bolts up on the front plate and on the top plate, and then once I've done that, again I'll just go and check again that all the linkages moved correctly, but I'll make sure these are torqued to the correct value. And that is the assembly of a bank of CV carburetors.